get in touch with my body, I will just put my hands in a butterfly and then I'll just self-soothe like that.
Yeah, you taught me this. It's really good.
A psychiatrist taught me this and I thought it's amazing. Yes. Hello, welcome to the Handful of Leaves podcast. This is Cheryl, and with me I have the co-founders of Handful of Leaves, Kai Xin and Heng. Today I really want to dig deep into both of their lives and just ask them all the nitty-gritty kepochi questions with the tea set that we have here. So we'll be splitting the tea. And the reason for that is because when I first met Heng and Kai Xin, I always look at them as leaders in the Buddhist circle that are very competent, very confident, very capable, and almost it's already like setting.
Confident, capable, what others see.
Yeah, everything that basically gives me the impression that they've got their shit together. Me being a curious person, I want to know them a little bit better. I want to know what really are the struggles that they're facing, what are some of the anxieties they're having, and of course, I imagine there'll be a lot of pearls of wisdom they'll share with us today. So, first off, are you ready for the difficult questions I'm going to throw?
Sure.
Fire away. Spill the tea.
Amazing. So, firstly, maybe we start with something about the future. What are you most excited to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months?
Wow.
You said you were ready.
I can start first. Personally, it's not so much of an achievement, but I'm quite looking forward to the next chapter of my life. I'll be moving out of Singapore and kind of working remotely. Why you do that expression?
It's a cry.
Yeah, and just dedicating more time for formal practice. Yeah.
And why are you excited about that?
Because I've always been wanting to live abroad and be more independent and do my spiritual practice. Finally, the conditions are right for me to pursue that. Yeah. So I wouldn't say excited. I'm looking forward to it, but I have learned not to be too attached to my plans because they never turn out the same way that I want them to be. Yeah.
So wholesome.
What do you have that is not so wholesome?
We'll find out later. But what about you, Xuan?
For me, I think in 3 to 6 months would be actually going to India on a pilgrimage with Kai Xin and Cheryl.
Oh, yes.
That's something I look forward to because I've only been to the birthplace of the Buddha. So this time around we are going to different places like the Enlightenment place and also the place that he gave his first teaching. So that's the Sarnath Park. So I'm really excited for that. And on the more mundane side, happy to go Japan for holiday because like this whole year I just travel mainly for work lah. Yeah, time to use those miles and be happy and indulge in vegetarian Japanese food or something like that.
Oh, it's quite hard to find vegetarian Japanese.
Super hard. So
Tamago all the way, tofu.
yeah, like go to the temples, the soft tofu.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, you always be eating the agedashi tofu.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll really be a walking tofu there.
Yes, the walking tofu.
That's his IG handle, you're saying.
So exciting plans ahead, and I'm also very curious to know, everyone would see you talking about HOL, would see you in public forums, holding the mic, being, like I said, very confident. What are your biggest insecurities?
I think I always don't sell myself well. I will always hold back like what are my good points. So I'm always insecure in the sense that I will always downplay. But thankfully my wife always will say like, oh, he's downplaying himself, which makes it very awkward. So I think that's one of the insecurities I have, which is like to not present my full self somehow. I always feel like I have to be humble and like not talk about my wins. The more mundane stuff is that they just found I can't do latte art. So that's another thing in the box of one thing that I can't do.
Why do you think you have that insecurity?
Very good question. I think that I have that because I just want to stand out lor. I always want to try my best to be normal and not try to stand out. Because when you stand out, then you have to lead stuff. Then I'm very sian to lead stuff. So I'm just like...
Which is ironic because you're leading so many things.
Exactly. So like I'm a big failure in that. Big failure is not being a leader in many things. Yeah.
Very interesting. It's not that you're not confident about yourself. It's just that you prefer to not put yourself out there. But you have that quiet confidence of like knowing securely what you're good at, what you can do.
Except when it comes to like networking, like, you know, walking in the room full of people. I think I still do have that sense of like lack of confidence. And also sometimes like if you imagine you say like, oh, I'm great at marketing, and then you walk into a room and then the person is like better than you. So I think there's also a bit of that fear. So I think it stems from not having full confidence in what I have.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I definitely didn't know that about you. And sometimes you really do not know who are the people or what are some of the things that people may not be fully comfortable about themselves. And it's always the most unexpected people.
I think for me it's quite similar. I also not so much of a social butterfly. Now a bit rusty when it comes to networking. But I think deepest insecurity, it's not so much of lack of confidence, but is the contrast of my perception of myself versus what other people view of me. When I come to know that people put me on the pedestal, then that's where my insecurities come, because like I am not those things that people see me to be. And how can I tell them? What if they find out, am I not matching to people's expectations? And I will start having those self-doubt. And it feels like I have no control. Then I have no security. Yeah.
Okay. So it's like people's expectations and judgments because of the way they view you. And because you cannot control that, it just makes you feel very insecure.
Somewhat.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense. Sounds a little bit paradoxical.
You don't want to disappoint people's dreams or their perception of you lah. Imagine if Superman has way more weakness than kryptonite, but he's like the best superhero kind of thing. But it turns out that he's not.
That's true.
And I think that's the danger also of putting people on pedestals, be it your partner or your boss or anyone else, because nobody is perfect. And the more we see people as perfect, the more we get disappointed as well.
Yeah, 100%.
That's why there's a saying that says, take refuge in dead people. Because they can no longer surprise you. In the sense that once their life is over, they are not going to change drastically. Unless, of course, there's expose. But take refuge in dead people, because that's the very unchanging thing. And the further back in the past that you take refuge in dead people, the better. Because then that shoots you on a trajectory to be towards the ideals or the values that they hold.
What is one thing you're struggling with right now? It could be personal, it could be professional, or even spiritually.
Deep thoughts.
Yes. The reason why I'm pausing here is because you said spiritual, professional, and
So many aspects. Okay, I think I can go first. I wouldn't say it's a struggle. I think as the practice gets a little bit more mature, the struggle is less turbulent. I think it goes back to the same theme of not wanting to disappoint people. I have my own plans, but at the back of my head, I know it might be in conflict with what people want of me, or my departure might not necessarily cause people to be very happy about it, even though verbally they might give their blessings to me. So internally, I struggle to be at peace with them. And it's constant reminder to say that, hey, I'm not responsible for somebody else's happiness. I have my own life to lead also. Set a boundary and parameter as to how much I can sacrifice the dreams that I want, and not taking other people's emotion personally. Yeah.
That's a deep one. And it's very hard because a lot of times expectations are also, it's not explicit that they mention to you.
Yeah, I think that's the worst, because then I don't know what are some of the action steps I can take in order to resolve this unspoken tension. And there's something about not being transparent and honest about feelings with people that makes me feel very uncertain. Yeah.
And especially if it's like generational, right? If it's like your parents, grandparents, auntie, relative, maybe it's in their generation to not be so forthcoming with what they truly feel.
Yeah.
There's a conflict that they may have also. It's similar, right? It's like, but it's my child's life. I don't really want to be a burden to them as well.
I think for me, it's maybe a bit more opposite from Kai Xin. The thing I struggle with more is, because of the nature of my industry, it's like we're a bit more numbers driven. I tend to be more cold, so I think it's something I'm trying to learn to actually be less cold and to be more warm in a sense. To put myself out there, to listen to people's hardships and all of that. So recently, a person called me for like counseling to seek advice, and at the moment I was multitasking. I was actually cleaning data and then listening to the individual share about their heartbreak. At the moment I was like, hey, wow, what am I doing? But I was like, wow, I'm so productive. So it's in these moments that I was like, okay, I'm struggling because sometimes I overvalue efficiency and undervalue human relationships. But for me, the guy was super happy. He was like, oh wow, this is great. I hope to start dating again, blah, blah, all of that. And then in me, it's like, oh, I finished my data and I helped console a friend and also at the same time manage other things. I was just like, yes. That's why I struggle with it, because I feel like to a certain extent I'm rewarded in the sense of being productive And a guy feels happy, but then I'm not truly very present with the person.
Right.
Yeah, so I still struggle with that efficiency / human centricity. Yeah.
I think what's interesting in both of your sharing is always having to juggle between what you want versus the cost of it. Of like, for you in the case of being present, and for you it's like the emotional implications of the people around you. And I don't think we can ever get to a perfect balance, right? So where you have to accept that this is the best that you can do at this point, and then if there are better ways to do it or different ways to do it, then you change it up.
Yeah, I think it's also very circumstantial. So let's say if you're really busy, right, then of course a sweet spot would be how can you do your work while listening to a friend who just needs somebody to rant to. But if the person is coming to you for advice and you're not present, then maybe it might not work so well.
Yeah.
And then there are times when subscribing too much to emotions and empathy can actually backfire. Like in my case, right, if I were to think too much about how people feel, then I would never pursue the things that I want to do. So I think it's very circumstantial, and it's never like, hey, this is the way that everyone should be.
Yeah, solution should never be prescriptive. Always looking into the context. And what has been the biggest conflict that you have ever faced? It could be, again, anything. It could even be between both of you, because you look at things in a very different perspective. Yeah, you can choose to answer from the working together perspective or in your own personal life.
I want to say conflict with myself. But in terms of working together, I think not so much of conflict, but healthy and constructive moments where we have differing views. So Xuan always called me very optimistic. Then he would say, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. Like, why would this work? Then he would list 10 different reasons why it would not work, but still say, okay, if you think you can, then let's just do it. I'll give you my support.
Yeah.
And then see how it pans out. Which I thought was great, because it's not like, okay, you assume that it wouldn't work and we don't even try. So I thought that was quite a healthy balance.
Yeah, I think it boils back to this concept in corporate. They call it disagree and commit. So basically it's like to register your disagreement on a certain topic, but at the same time you commit because you believe in your teammates so much so that you're willing to say, I will suspend my assumptions that I previously held, and I will just go, I'll put in like 100% effort because I want you to succeed, because you succeeding equals like we succeeding. Yeah, and it also boils back to the term of like no one really knows, right? We are in uncharted territories for a handful of leaves because this has not really been done before in Southeast Asia. So just disagree, commit, and we have all the time healthy debates on major portions of like where handful of leaves should go. Yeah.
And has there been a time where Kai Xin disappointed you?
Oh, I didn't have it. I drop balls and things fall through the cracks.
No, I think it's not disappoint per se lah, but it's like, okay, she didn't deliver, but like I'm not like this up to the point where I'm like, wow, beat my chest, be very sad about it. I just accept it as just a natural tendency, right? Even in corporate world, people do drop balls. And that's just completely normal, right? So one more voluntary organization as we are right now, people will drop balls, people will disappoint, and the question is just like, if balls are dropped, then how can we help one another succeed? Rather than how can we blame each other better. So I think that's like the fine line. This thing happened, what is your response to the situation?
Yeah, and that's the intent of the question as well. Is not just for the sampah lapa. Sorry, throw you under the bus.
It's okay, I disappoint.
But rather to really understand, because bad things do happen. People disappoint, things don't go our way, and it's more about what happens after. What do you do about it? How do you mend the friendship, relationship, or the problem? Yeah. We will move on a little bit, but before we move on, is there a final tip you want to give to leaders out there on how to communicate better?
I feel like it's important to call out stuff, especially disappointment, rather than just let it simmer, because you never know such things will accumulate, right? So we have open conversations when, let's say, if I took on too many things and I have too much on my plate and I drop certain things, then he would ask me about it. Then I would take accountability and say, I have no excuse to drop this. I'm sorry. How can I do better? And then, recalibrate. And similarly, we just had conversation around maybe there are certain words that were used on certain subject that I felt like, oh, okay, I don't know where this is coming from. Then we had an open conversation about how I felt, the narrative I had about what was said, and then he shared his piece of the story. Then we aligned, just like, oh yeah, true, it's all perception. Then we're good. That open communication is so important.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that open communication is the bridge to vulnerability, to working with each other better, because you understand each other's perspective. If not, you're forever looking at the different side of the image and just fighting about my side is correct, your side is wrong.
Yeah, and it's never about that, right? So like when we're working on HOL, it's something beyond us. So even when it comes to disagreement, it's not about I'm right and you're wrong, but how can we make us better? And I think that should be an anchor point to ground any kind of conversation. Yeah.
Thanks for
I
sharing.
agree, like tips for leaders out there, I think it's sharing vulnerability, but not sharing vulnerability for the sake of it. Some leaders, they will say like, oh, I was also like you last time, I made many mistakes. But the but then kills the whole vulnerability situation. The thing here is to show vulnerability and say that you're still trying to get it right. You're still trying to move on it. So I think like for leadership, open communication is one thing. I've been through like different like corporate environments where the leader always says open door policy, but everyone's just like, yeah, roll eyes. Because you know that it's not open, but once you share vulnerability and you share that you do fail, even people in my workplace, they share that they did cry at work before, male crying at work. And I feel like that gives huge feeling of vulnerability being shared. And then after that, you realize that communication can flow much better. Yeah.
And it's the moment you use that but, you already establish a kind of power differentiation.
Yeah, means like I can do it.
I'm better than you.
We are like that, but then I will be here lah, because
Yeah.
I am more zai.
Yeah.
And usually what is said before the but is
Deleted,
erased.
now.
Don't count.
Yeah. We will move to maybe just one more question because of time. The struggles you shared, the disagreements, I think sometimes they can take an emotional piece on you as well, where
I'm giving an expression. Does it really take an emotional toll?
Yeah.
Okay, like.
okay, do you all agree it takes an emotional?
I don't think so.
No. We are quite chill, just like talk it
Yeah,
out.
Yeah.
Because work is more professional, right? But if you're talking about, say, outside of work relationship, friendship, or even like your loved one with families, then definitely there's more things to hold on to that would take an emotional toll.
Okay, so I guess like referencing, the times where you had challenges emotionally, going through a tough time, what is your favorite mindful practice or technique for dealing with these difficult emotions?
There's one technique that's used very much in the Tibetan tradition, and this is usually used very much so when your mindfulness is really weak. And actually that's taking deep breaths in. So I learned this from a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. When you breathe in the joy of the world, the joy of everyone around you. And when you breathe out the frustrations that you're holding in your heart. And doing that just 3 times actually helps soften the mind. Because oftentimes I feel in the mindfulness landscape, it's always very idealistic. Oh yeah, you should meditate like 30 minutes a day, and if you cannot, you can recite this mantra and all of that. But I feel like, honestly, sometimes you just need that 3 deep breaths. They call it cleansing breaths to kind of just reset, and then you're able to take on certain things. So I think that for me is like the very quick mindful tip. But if you're more like feeling kind of person, like tactile, they always say every time there is like a doorknob, you touch the doorknob, then you breathe in and out. So that's one way.
Oh, touch a doorknob, then breathe in and out. Because doorknobs are everywhere.
Correct. So it's like before you enter a space, you touch the doorknob and you just like mindful.
Now auto door everywhere.
Yeah. So if it's auto door, then
The door panel.
door panel, just touch.
For me, when it comes to very difficult emotions, I've come to realize not to resist it. So what I would do is I would magnify it really, really huge. And it's very interesting because it's very tiring to hold on to these emotions. And if I were to observe when I would hit rock bottom and get out of it, is when the emotion is so intense and I feel so tired out that I say enough is enough. And then I would have the capacity to say, actually, why am I so angry? Or like, why am I so upset? Then I play out different scenarios and options. And it all boils down to this sense of self. It's not a mindfulness tip per se, but I think contemplating on non-self really, really helped. So it's a mantra that has allowed me to let go and make peace and transform my life, basically.
Wow, that's very deep. And yeah, I think my personal favorite is when things get really, really hard for me. I try to connect with the emotions as well, but it's usually very hard because the first thing, instinctively, we just want to run away. Yeah, so what I will do is to get in touch with my body. I will just put my hands in a butterfly and then I'll just self-soothe like that.
Yeah, you taught me this. It's really good.
A psychiatrist taught me this and I thought it's amazing. Yes.
As in you tap or what?
Yeah, so I tap it. Yeah, and then I'll just feel better. And when I feel better, then I can get in touch with the emotion because it kind of just become a bit smaller. Or I become bigger because of my mindfulness being present.
Yeah, I think the physical sensation is the very easy gateway to helping us to stabilize our mind. Yeah, because if our mind is not stable enough, sometimes we think and we play out different scenarios, right? We might go into
Rabbit hole of just thinking and
like this
overthinking.
narrative, and it can get quite bad. So I think listeners who are tuning into this, it's also good to understand what works for you. There is no one fixed approach. Yeah.
And with that, we've come to the end of this mini episode and I hope you enjoyed it. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe on our YouTube and continue to stay
Happy
And wise.